Hello everyone. I wanted to make a quick tutorial in GeoPix on how to build something like this, which is essentially a fixture that's made up of multiple subfixtures in GeoPix. Now we're not going to be using custom fixtures for this. There's a few reasons, but the main one is that custom fixtures do not have a way to create arrays of these little diodes, and so you end up having to create each one separately. And that's going to slow things down, and that has a lot to do with the way custom fixtures are built and accelerated using custom shaders. Won't get into that too much here, but just know if you are building something like this, the better way is to create several fixtures for each component or area of this, and then maybe create or import a piece of geometry to represent the body of it. And that will get you pretty far in terms of, the customizability, and it'll be way faster in performance. So okay, let's dive right in. So in GeoPix, we have a new scene here. The first thing we want to do is create a fixture. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll drop one in, and we'll hop over to hull mode, and then we'll click on the add hull tool, which is also the A on the keyboard, and we'll just drop two hulls. And I want this to be something that we can duplicate and reuse, right? So we're going to make the second hull. Use real measurements for whatever you're building if you have them, but in general, it doesn't matter too much as long as you have everything sized relatively to each other, and that's all spatially correct. So, all right, we're going to do -50 to 50 so that our origin is in the middle. So if we hop back to object mode and we move this around, it's centered. So if you have a preference and you'd rather have it left or right justified, you can set up your initial construction a little bit differently. So we're going to go back in the hull mode and select both of our hulls, and we're going to go over here to the hull menu and do a generator from selection. What this will do is create a generator, parent it to our fixture, set it up, and move us back to object mode. So if you zoom in a little bit here, you'll see they're all dark because there is no content being applied to them, but we have 10 pixels going across. So let's go ahead and set this to 12 because we have 12 of these yellow lamps going across here. Now notice that the first and last yellow lamp are actually offset from the edge, so that if you put these end to end, you have a nice repeating pattern. We'll come back to that. That's going to be something we'll tweak at the very end. Okay, so we have 12 pixels. Let's go ahead and create a projector so we can just see these dots a little easier. So we're going to create a projector from the main menu. We'll scoot it back and scale it up and squash it down a little bit, and then we'll just turn on the red channel. This is my preferred way of working because the red channel is typically the first ArtNet channel, first diode, so it's just an elegant channel to test with because it usually is the least fuzzy to kind of see and turn on if you're comparing this to real lights. But anyways, we'll just turn the visibility off on that for now. Okay, so we'll call this mid, I guess, and this will be fixture mid. So we can hit Control D to duplicate this fixture, and now we can name this one top, and we'll just bump this up. We'll move it up a little bit. I think 3 is a fine number. I like to use, more exact numbers because it's just easier to mirror things and kind of fix things if they happen to get shifted later. So yeah, in a case like this, having some fractional number that's 3 or 4 spots over from the decimal place doesn't really benefit us in any real way. So okay, so with this fixture top, we'll grab its generator, and by the way, there's 48 of these blue pixels. I went ahead and counted them before this video. So we'll set our X count to 48, and that's looking good. Before we make the bottom row, there's a few things we need to address here. The first is the size of these pixels. They're obviously supposed to be a lot smaller. This is a compound fixture with different types of lamps, so we want to emulate that as close as possible. There's a couple places we can change the size, but the one we care about is the fixture centric. So if we grab our fixture underscore top, and then the object attributes, we just scroll down to the rendering section with the blue header, there will be something called a parameter called pix scale. It's default to 3. Let's just set this to 1, I guess. 1 seems reasonable for now. We can tweak all this later, so let's not dwell on it too much. Okay, and with that done, let's go ahead and duplicate this fixture with Control D, and we'll move it a -3 on Y, and we'll call this fixture bot for bottom. So this is looking pretty good so far. We've now got a pretty complete number of pixels that matches the real deal. Now, if you are, obviously you're going to have to match your ArtNet spec sheet that came with this device, because I don't know which of these pixels comes first in that ArtNet chain. And I'm also making the assumption here that they're all RGB. They may not be. We have other tutorials here on the wiki for dealing with multiple channels that is not 3, so custom channel layouts, and even visualizing custom lamps, like if you have a UV lamp or an amber lamp. We have ways to set that up and visualize it. We've got tutorials on that here, so check those out, and that should help a lot. But definitely follow this one through completion before jumping into those. I think it'll help a little bit to do one than the other. But again, for this video, we'll just assume these are all RGB, but that they are different sizes, and that we may also want to address the small ones with different content than we would want to address the one in the middle. So with that said, let's go ahead and throw something a little bit more interesting into the content. And this is to illustrate the concept of masking in GeoPix, which I think we have a tutorial on masking as well, but we're going to cover it very briefly here. Okay, so with this projector selected, I'll go up to projector and do fit to scene, just so that we get a nice tight fit. And we're going to scale it. There's a little bit of a bug, as you can see here, where fit will actually shrink things in a little bit too much. That's good. I really just want the width to be a little bit more fit to the actual shape. So in the IO tab now, we'll go to Create, System Nodes, All, Macro, and then we'll connect this macro's output to projector 1, or whatever you have your projector name to, and then we'll click Play for this projector, which there's also a button on the projector's attributes called Start. So once you have the ramp moving, you know, we have a few videos that cover editing macros, so we won't go into that either. We'll just leave this as simple as possible. And back over here in the editor, we'll see that we have this blue ramp. It's also mixed with the red. We need to get rid of the red. So to do that, we scroll down in our projector's attributes, parameters, sorry, and we take our constant color back to 0. We can just right click on the label to reset that. Okay, so this is looking good. Let's go ahead and duplicate our projector. We'll move it back. So we have one projector. Let's say this is our projector for this middle row of pixels, the big lamps, and then we have a second projector that we want to use to map the top and bottom smaller rows of pixels. So we'll call this projector small, and we'll call the other one projector big. Now, let's just use a red color on projector small for now. So the obvious problem that we're having here is that we're just back to square one, right? We're mixing two different projectors, and they're both being applied to all the pixels. So to use masking, it's pretty straightforward. What we need to do is select our fixture mid, one with the big lamps, and then we'll go up to Tools. I'm sorry, it would be under Fixture, and then it would be Mask Editor. So once you have that open, and you have your fixture selected, we'll go into this mask base name field, and we'll just type mid, and we'll click Create. And if you hover over it, you'll see that those large lamps will highlight, and it will show you that the mask is there. So that's nice. It indicates that we have set that up correctly. And we'll select fixture bottom, and fixture top. And now we'll call this mask edge, keeping the names simple, as you can see. And if we hover over this, we should have them both. We don't, and I think that's because I accidentally deselected top. So what we can do is we can select fixture top and click the plus icon. That will set the mask to 1 on selected. So now we hover over this, you'll see that we have the edge mask contains the small diodes, and the mid one contains the large. So we're all done here. We can close this tool. So if we select projector big and we scroll down here to routing, what we want to do is for mask R, mask G, and mask B, type in a value, and we'll go ahead and call this mid, which is the name of our mask. And so we'll put this in here, and right away you'll see that we only have this blue ramp pulsing along the middle diodes. So just a quick pause to explain what's going on here. Projector is receiving its content from the I/O, and that's getting its content. It's currently wired up from a macro, and since macro 2 is playing, it's outputting content to projector big. And in the editor, projector big, which is the one I have selected right now, is routing the red channel of our texture from macro into the R LED channel, which is the default name for all fixtures. That's what they use by default. But it's masking it to the mid group, right? The mid mask group. And the same is true for routing GB and A when we're not using alpha, so it doesn't really matter. And so we'll do the same thing over here with projector small. We'll scroll down and we'll use a different mask name. We'll call this edge because that's the one we set up for our edge pixels. And once we've done that, we now have our edge pixels isolated and running off of this projector. So it's, there's a lot of ways to set up your content stream. When I do something like this, I tend to keep these two projectors in sync spatially so that they're the same width, same height, same X and Y offsets. So that way, the content I'm running to these two projectors, if they are related to each other, they will be spatially in sync, if that makes sense. So if you have two ramps that are going left to right, and they're both supposed to be in the same space spatially, if your projectors are a little bit offset, you're going to have some issues. So it really just depends. Maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you actually want different content going to your small diodes, and that's totally fine too. It's the wonderful thing about GeoPix is you can set your content up in a myriad of ways once you get to this point. So just as a quick last demonstration, we'll duplicate our macro in the I/O tab. We'll go inside, and on ramp 1, we'll just click edit, and I'm just going to randomize this just quickly, get something different to look at. There we go. So something with a different color spectrum. So this is already playing. And so we'll just drag this little connector into the background. We'll disconnect it, and now we'll connect it to projector small. So we have macro 2 going into projector big and macro 3 going into small. And it is doing what you'd expect it to do. It's the content that we see from the second ramp. So all is well. So that's basically it. The last thing I will do is create a geometry. Now, if you want to make this a lot prettier, you can obviously import your geometry. Basically, what I was going to say is if you are using geometry in Blender and you want to design something more complete, you can import that geometry here. But for this video, I'm just going to use a primitive, a cube in this case. And we can just scale it down to size, right? Now, with this, you don't want to push them all the way up against, these are sprites, by the way. These are two-dimensional dots. They're not actually, as you can see right here, they're clipping. They're not three-dimensional. So when you design fixtures like this, you're going to want to put a little bit of space between them, even though technically, yeah, the bulb was mounted into the geometry, unless you've designed your geometry to have holes there, I would just go ahead and do something like that. And you could, create a few pieces of geometry for the brackets. I've found that this is helpful when I'm dealing with moving lights and stuff like that, where the pan tilt is dependent on the orientation of the base. But in this case, it's less important unless, your pixels are mapped in a way that is more obvious and intuitive when you have these brackets. So it's up to you. Don't add complexity you don't have to add. That's just general rule of thumb. But sometimes you need it, and sometimes it helps. So sometimes also I will put stuff like this in, but I will delete it later. So, for example, something we hadn't done. There's a couple things we haven't done yet, actually. So let's go ahead and tackle those. So fixture mid, I said I wanted to pull these in so that it could repeat better. And what I mean by repeat is if we select our three fixtures and our three pieces of geometry, what we have is our unit, right? This is our fixture. So I'm going to hit Control G and group that. So we have a group that we can move around as a single unit. So that's convenient. Also, if we look at our errors up here, you'll notice that we have some project issues. It says the three fixtures we have are currently gen blocked. This is fine. We've made adjustments to our fixtures, which is our masking. And so our generators are no longer going to overwrite that. So that might be a problem here in a moment. Also, system errors. We have some stuff here, but we could ignore that. So I'm jumping around here, but the reason why is because we need to adjust these positions for fixture mid. And so to do that, we need to go into our hulls and shrink these a little bit. Now, you'll notice that we are no longer dynamic, right? We're not updating anymore when we move our hulls, and that's because we've modified our fixture with custom data. And so if the generator's regenerated, that stuff would be wiped. So what we can do is we can just select our generator that's child of fixture mid, and we can go up here to generator and do force regenerate. Now this will wipe our masking out, but that's okay because we can recreate that pretty easily. So if we select fixture mid, go to fixture, mask editor, you notice that mid is gone. Let's just go ahead and type mid, create, and we are back in business. Okay. So we've fixed our tiling. Obviously, if you were doing this for real, you would want to measure out these distances and make sure it tiles perfectly. But for the sake of this video, I think that's close enough. And something else that will make your scene faster is deleting stuff you don't need. So let's say we have decided this is a perfectly fine arrangement of pixels. We don't need to change them. We can delete our generators. And so deleting them means that nothing will cause our fixtures to regenerate, which is typically good, but you lose that flexibility if you are still building out your scene. I don't recommend this. This would be something you do for a show-ready scene file that you just want to open and use over and over and over again. And the reason why that's good is you have just less objects in your scene graph, which means moving it around is going to be faster, duplicating it's going to be faster, saving and loading your file is going to be faster. So it's a good thing all around. But be careful with it because that flexibility is gone afterwards. All right, so here I've duplicated this fixture 3 times, so you can kind of see how this is going. If we just go ahead and grab our projectors and scale them up, yeah, we have an array that's now mapped cohesively. tiles-ish okay. Like I said, you would have wanted to measure the distance between this pixel and the edge and do some math to make sure that visually the dots repeated, irrespective of what the actual geometry or the fixture's case was doing. But that is something that will be different for every fixture. So hopefully this helps. This is what I would call a compound fixture in GeoPix because we're using multiple regular fixtures to create kind of a larger fixture with different characteristics between different lamps. And yeah, if you want to turn on some of the volumetrics at this point, you could do that as well. These lamps are all point lamps, so if you wanted these to be spotlights or simulate spotlights, you can go into the fixture settings down here under lighting, and you can change it to cone. And this is like a whole thing that we'll have a separate tutorial on, but these would be the settings that you would customize to kind of tweak the cone angle, fall off, etc., etc. So, all right, that concludes this tutorial. Thanks for watching.